Hey guys, so I'm gonna work on some pancakes today for you guys. I did promise the breakfast item, so I'm gonna go ahead and do pancakes. I've got apple cinnamon pancakes slated. So I call them apple cinnamon pancakes because I'm gonna make an apple compote to go on top of the pancakes, and then I'm also gonna incorporate some spices such as cinnamon and nutmeg into the pancake. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna get started on the apple compote first, so it gives it enough time to cool down before we start working on the pancakes. So first, I'm going to start with green apples. I like the tartness of them, as well as I think that they also cook really well. Most of your apple pies or like apple strudels and stuff like that are made with green apples. You can use like Macintosh apples or Red Delicious apples also. It's just really more of a personal preference of mine, and like I said, I think that they withstand heat a lot better. So we're gonna start by peeling the apple. So first, what I like to do is I like to peel the apple all the way around, right? So I'll start by just making a circular motion all the way around the apple and just continue going down and taking the peel off as I'm going all the way around the apple. So hopefully, if I do it right and I make it all the way around, I'll have one large peel taken off the apple, and I will have done it in one swift movement all the way around. So I'm left with just the large peel taken off the apple, and then you're left with just a little bit of peel at the bottom, which I can go ahead and just take off, and a little bit of peel at the top. So I'll just go ahead and take that off as well, and then any trace peels around it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of these apples peeled, and I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna dice them. Alright, now that we've got all these peeled, I'm going to show you how I'm going to go ahead and dice these. I like to have like small apple slices as the compote versus diced apples. So I'm going to go ahead and first start by cutting them in half, and then I'm going to cut those halves in half. Right, so the reason I do that is so that way I can take the half and I can cut the core out. So I'll go ahead and take the half here and just kind of cut along the side here in a diagonal motion going down, and what that'll do is that'll cut the core out of the apple slice and leave me with just this part of the apple. And if you have any little bit left from the top, you can go ahead and give that a slice off as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to the rest of these apples, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do from there. Okay, now that we have all of these sliced and the cores removed, I'm going to go ahead and show you the size slices that I like, or that I'm going to like in the compote. So I am going to take each one of these and kind of cut around them to get different slices. Now, these are relatively small apples. I didn't get very large green apples. I bought the bag that comes together. That's like a 5-pound bag of apples. So they give you kind of the smaller ones. So what I'm going to do is each one of these quarters, I'm actually going to cut into quarters quarters themselves, and then that's the kind of size slice that I'm going to get. So you'll see here, they're not very big, but it's enough to get like a hearty chunk of apple, and when you put them over the top of the pancake, it's going to look really nice versus having like irregular sized dices or things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and slice the rest of these up, and then we'll get started on actually cooking the compote. We're going to go ahead and start with making the compote. So I've got a saucepan here. I've got a rubber spatula. Right, and so we're going to go ahead and just set this to, I don't know, medium heat, maybe a little one over. So I've got it set to about 6 here. And I'm going to start with just allowing the pan to get hot a little bit, and you know, 10 seconds at most. Especially with gas, it doesn't take very long to get hot. So I'm going to go ahead and start by adding orange juice in. Now, some of this stuff I've already pre-measured out just because I didn't want a lot of things over here as I'm trying to work. So if you'll notice, I've got about a ½ cup of orange juice, maybe a little bit over ½ cup of orange juice. Now, depending on how much compote you want to make, I would say that a good ratio for apple to orange juice to sugar is 4-to-1, right? So 4 parts apple, 2 parts orange juice, 1 part sugar. And that will allow you to scale this recipe anywhere from, you know, enough for 8 people or just enough for yourself. So I've got about a half a cup of orange juice and about 2 cups worth of apples. So I'm gonna start by just adding the orange juice into here. You notice that the pan is already really hot. We can go ahead and add the apples in, and we'll add the sugar in. Now, I like to go ahead and start stirring this already before we put any of the spices or anything like that in there, just so that the sugar starts really getting incorporated into the juice and it can start to thicken up. Now, the whole objective of this is for the apples to get a nice syrup on them, as well as get a little bit tender and easier to eat as a compote or like as a jelly preserve over the top of the pancakes. So as you can see here, I've got 2 seasonings. I'm going to end up using ground nutmeg and ground cinnamon. Now, I'm going to add a teaspoon of both of those into this. So a teaspoon of ground nutmeg and a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. And also, I am going to add a teaspoon of lemon juice in there. Now, the acid is just to kind of balance out the flavors, because if you'll notice, like, I'll add acid to a lot of things, especially things that have sugar or have a little too much like mayonnaise, or have more of your like bitter kind of stuff to it, because it kind of just levels it out and adds a really nice balance to it. And as well as the apples, it'll keep them from browning. If you want to actually keep apples fresh, you can use apple cider vinegar and water, and you can actually slice apples and put that in there, and it will keep the apples from browning. So now we're just going to allow this to start really getting heated and start to really thicken. So I would say anywhere from about 10 to 12 minutes it's going to take for this to really thicken it and for the apples to get tender. Now I'm going to put just a pinch of salt in there, so just a small amount, just to really enhance the flavor of it altogether. So we're gonna go ahead and let this cook, and then we'll come back to it in about 10 to 12 minutes. So you'll notice we're about halfway through the 10 minutes here with the apple compote. So it's really got a nice like boil going to it, which is okay as long as you kind of keep stirring it and don't let anything burn to the bottom. You'll start noticing that the liquid in it is really starting to thicken. And start creating a syrup. So we're about 5 minutes into it. We're gonna kind of just keep babying it, maybe stir it a little bit just to make sure nothing burns at the bottom, and give it about another 5 minutes, and we'll come back and check on it. So we're coming to the ending part here. It's been about 10 minutes since this has been on. If you really notice that it's really starting to get thick and really start to coat the apples have started to get soft and a lot more tender. I've kind of reduce the heat down now at this point to about 3.5, and just letting it really start to slowly simmer and really thicken. I wouldn't say much more than about a minute or 2 left on this, and we'll have exactly what we're looking for as far as a compote goes. Right now the heat may be a little too high for it to really thicken exactly where I want it to. We still want some juice in there, just because that's going to be kind of what goes over the top of the pancakes. Alright, so I think we're exactly where we want to be as far as the thickness of the syrup. Now if I take the heat all the way off of it, it'll start to kind of cool down, and as it cools down it'll really thicken a whole lot more. So I'm just going to go ahead and set this off to the side while we make the pancake batter. So I went ahead and took the liberty of pre-measuring out the ingredients for the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients for the pancakes. I'll go ahead and put the measurements in the description so that way you can reference them again. All I did was first did the dry mix, and then I also did the wet mix already as well, so that way we can go ahead and just show you really how I'm gonna mix it. Now, as far as the dry ingredients go, for the batch size that I'm doing, I did 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, double acting baking powder, 1 teaspoon of sugar, and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And for the wet ingredients, I put 3 tablespoons of melted butter, as well as 1 1/4 cups of milk and 2 eggs into this. So these are just some key things as far as good tips as far as when you're using baking powder for anything. Now I'm showing you guys how to make pancake mix from start to finish from scratch, right? Now I'm not against using any pre-mix mixes. We have there's some good ones out there that you can use. There's ones that you just add water. There's ones that you have to add the milk and the eggs into, and you can use those as well and just kind of spice it up by adding a few things that I'm going to show you that I'm going to add to these pancakes. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind though, when you're making pancake mix or anything that has baking powder in it, especially for pancakes, double acting baking powder reacts to 2 different things. It reacts to moisture and heat. So if, let's say you're making pancake mix with that one that's just add water. If you add water from the sink water is actually warm enough to start causing the baking powder to react. Now what that does is the baking powder actually adds a gas to it, which fluffs up the pancakes as you're cooking it. So the only thing I can tell you is if you are going to use a pancake mix that's just add water, try making sure that your water is cold, as cold as it can possibly be before adding it to it, so that way the baking powder only reacts when it's on the stovetop and you get fluffier pancakes. So we're going to start by first putting the dry ingredients in the KitchenAid. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just give us a small mix of the dry ingredients, just enough to get it really mixed together and kind of aerate it a little bit and make sure that they're even before we actually start adding in the wet ingredients. Now, of course, you can do this by hand. I happen to have a stand mixer to mix it, and granted it's actually brand new, so it's one of the first times I'm getting to use it. But you can mix it by hand. I've done it for forever before even getting this. I use a hand whisk on almost making virtually anything. So now that we've got a nice stir on the dry ingredients, I'm going to go ahead and add the wet ingredients in. I'll go ahead and leave it on stir for now on a short and just kind of slowly start incorporating the wet ingredients. Now this is all of the wet ingredients that we have. So as I'm adding in the wet ingredients, I'll just make sure and get everything incorporated into it, and we're actually scraping the bowl as we're adding it in. I don't want to overwork this batter, right? When you overwork batters, you actually incorporate a little too much heat and then the baking powder won't work. Now for pancake mix, it's okay to actually have lumps in it. That's acceptable, and in fact it actually makes for a good pancake. So we're going to go ahead and let it mix for about 30 seconds. We're going to scrape the bowl, and then we're going to stir it for about another 30 seconds. So I want to make sure that I scrape the bowl really well to get any of those ingredients that didn't quite make it to the middle part of the bowl, and they get incorporated in. And you want to scrape all the way down to the center, because even at the bottom, that's not really getting caught by the mixer as well as it should be. And so we're going to make sure and scrape really well, and then we're going to let it stir for about another 30 seconds. All right, now that we've allowed it to stir and incorporate all together, we're gonna go ahead and add some seasonings into it. So I'm gonna add 4 distinct spices in there. I'm actually gonna use a 1/4 teaspoon. I don't wanna overwhelm it. So the 4 ingredients that I'm gonna add into it is ground nutmeg, ground cinnamon, ground allspice, and ground cloves. Right, so all of it's McCormick. Like I said, I'm just gonna put a small amount in it, not to overwhelm the flavor for the pancakes. I think that all of these are very powerful spices, and if you add too much into there, it can get very overwhelming. So I'm going to go ahead and add these all into there, and then we're just going to give it a really quick stir. Again, we don't want to overwork the batter. So now that we've got them all incorporated in there, just give it a quick stir just to really get it all mixed into there well enough and not to actually overwork the batter. So now we've got it all incorporated in there, and we're gonna go ahead and start making our pancakes. Alright, so we are going to use a stainless steel pan for this application. You shouldn't need to put any kind of like cooking spray or anything like that on for a pancake. It should naturally, once finished, ready to flip on its own. I'm going to set the pan to about medium because I don't really want the pancakes to burn. We're going to go ahead and let the pan get hot all the way, and then we'll add the pancake batter into it. So now that the pan is hot, I'm going to actually use a 1/4 cup of batter for each pancake. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab some mix and put it directly into the center of the pan. This should give you decent sized pancakes. Obviously, you can adjust according to whatever size pancake that you would like. But I want some not so big, small to medium sized pancakes. So we're going to go ahead and let it cook until you start to see bubbles into the middle. You want to see a steady stream of bubbles popping along the pancake before we decide to go ahead and flip it. So we'll let it cook, I would say roughly about 30 seconds to a minute, just depending on how hot the pan is and your stove and a couple different variations. But pancakes will always give you that indication that they're ready to flip once you start really seeing a lot of bubbles and everything popping along the inside of it. So let's go ahead and let it cook, and then we'll get ready to flip it. Alright, so now it's starting to really show indications of it being ready to flip. As you can see, the bubbles and everything, so we're going to go ahead and give it a flip. And same with this side. You don't need much on this side, not more than about 15 to 30 seconds at most. If you let it cook too long on this side, it should have already cooked through most of the pancake already. You're just trying to get a nice color on the bottom part of it and let it cook that little part on the bottom. So now we know that it's done. We're going to go ahead and take it off the pan. Now that you got your pancakes made, we're going to go ahead and just top it with some of the compote. So first I'll start just by putting some apples amongst the top of it and just kind of, you know, placing them on there so that they look pretty. And then we also want some of this juice that's at the bottom of it. So I'll grab some of it and just kind of drizzle it over the top of the pancake. And you've got apple cinnamon pancakes. Okay guys, so that was my pancake recipe. I did apple compote along with just some spiced pancakes. I think they turned out really good. It's pretty quick and easy. Like I said, you can also use pre-mixed batter if you want to save some time and just add some of those seasonings in there. The apple compote doesn't take much time at all. And in fact, you can make it ahead of time and it holds really well in the refrigerator. So I'm glad you guys, I hope you guys like the recipe and you like the video. If you like the video, make sure and push the like button. And if you want to see more recipes, make sure and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate you guys viewing my videos. My channel is growing really well, and I really appreciate all the love that I'm getting in the comments, and you guys are just wonderful. So thank you guys again, and you have a wonderful day.